Hello, and welcome to AART, the podcast about female artists. I'm Chris Stafford, and this is Season 1, Episode 1.
If you don't feel it, I'll make you feel it. I'll show you what I mean. If you don't feel it, I'll make you feel it. I'll bring you to your knees. If you follow me.
Hello, and a very big welcome to you. Thank you so much for tuning in to this first episode of AART, the podcast about female artists. And I look forward to sharing their stories, to bring them from behind the easel into the spotlight where they belong. And I'm absolutely thrilled that my first guest is actually an old friend of mine, and that is the sculptor Alexa King. But before we hear from my first guest, let me tell you a little about myself. I'm dual British-US citizen, and for the past 24 years I've lived in the US, and I'm based in Middleburg, Virginia. My first career was in professional sport, horses to be exact, and after injuries forced me to retire from the saddle, I embarked on a second career in the media as a journalist, author, a photographer, producer, director, and on-air presenter. And when podcasting came along, because radio really was my first love, I relished the challenge. And since 2009, I've produced and hosted well over 1,000 podcasts, and mainly in sport. But this one, though, is inspired by my love of art and admiration of women artists that I've discovered over time. I myself am an amateur landscape painter, mainly working in oils. I also work in wood and epoxy art. So this show actually combines my background and interests with the opportunity to share the stories of female artists from across the country and around the world. We'll dig deep into their background, how they got started, their inspiration, their mediums and muses. The purpose is to shine the spotlight on these women who have historically been kept hidden behind the easel. We'll explore the female gaze and how it translates to art. So let's get this show on the road and hear from my very first guest. Alexa King has been a lifelong artist whose passion and talent combined to achieve success from the start of her career. Since early childhood, she became absorbed in drawing, combining her love of horses with a fascination for art. She's always owned horses and ponies, so her intimate knowledge of anatomy and understanding of a horse's gait gave her a unique perspective from which to create her sculptures. Her mother's artistic eye and her father's skills in construction provided the springboard for her to pursue her education in art by studying studio art as a painting major at Ball State University in her hometown of Muncie, Indiana. Once she'd established skills in creating three-dimensional forms, she moved to Scottsdale, Arizona, where she cast her first bronze. This proved to be the launch pad of her career, which led to solo exhibitions at the Morris Douglas Fine Arts and Phippen O'Brien Gallery in Scottsdale. Her first major commission was to create a series representing the Pony Express for Nelson Rockefeller Collections in New York City. The memorial statue of the 2006 Kentucky Derby winner Barbaro, which stands at Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky, is probably her most famous piece, and the one of which she is most proud. With so many commissioned pieces now on display around the world, her creative impulse is never still. She begins each day with a drawing before she sets to work on a sculpture at her home in Verona, Wisconsin. Alexa, welcome to the podcast, and thank you very much for being my very first guest.
Well, I appreciate the idea, and hopefully it'll be a good one.
Well, you know, you and I have known each other a little while now. I've learned so much about art through you, through your sculpting, through your paintings, your drawings, and you as a person and your vision of the art world and your vision as a woman into art and how you express yourself. So I really want to tell the story of how you got to where you've been a lifelong artist, right? You've never done anything else, right?
No, I have to say no. A couple office jobs that maybe were a month or two as a fill-in or something, but I found that wasn't my that was not going to be in my future. I was going to be an artist no matter what. So that's what I did.
So you were born in Muncie, Indiana, back in 1952, we'll say that fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But your mother was an artistic influence in your life. So talk a little bit about your family background and then how that informed your direction in life.
Okay, my mother was a homemaker, but she also was an artist, and introduced me early into painting and drawing with pastels. Would take me to the Indianapolis Student League for her lessons that she would take with a portrait artist that was there, a relatively well-known one. And so I was smaller little kid then. I remember sitting on the floor, with a drawing pad and some pastels that they had bought for me for Christmas that was in a wooden box. I'll never forget. I wish I had it now. And this sort of graduated to the oil paints in those classes. We would paint out on it was an enclosed porch, like a studio area in the house. And she and I would set up our easels together and would paint still lives, things like that. Of course, I was interested in animals. So I started doing, some equine type things or dog pictures, things like that. And also people portraits. So she was very meticulous watercolorist too. I think she also did needlepoint and was she was really great seamstress. She could do clothing that was like, that was professionally made. She was beautiful handwork. So I think my mother instilled in me the craft, I guess you want to call it, of learning how to do it, how to do this art, and do it in a professional way. I mean, it was she's helped me out with it, but she pretty much also let me kind of go in my own directions. But now my father was a career Army officer. Our family had owned and still own a glass company in Muncie, Indiana, and my father went into the military at World War II and pretty much stayed in as an officer. So we ended up. He was in southern Indiana at a camp. It was called Camp Atterbury. It's 32,000 acres of training site for the military, all different types, air gunnery ranges, all that kind of stuff. We were the only family on that Army post. So he was very handy. He built 2 houses that they throughout their marriage. So he taught me how to use tools and helped me. Well, he built it. I mean, I helped him for what was worth the horse barn that was on the property, things like that. So I got a good sense of how to handle tools, not be afraid of them, and how to make things with my hands. So between the two, individuals like mom and dad, they had this young girl that was horse crazy and art crazy. So they sort of just let me do what I wanted to do. They got me a horse, and so I could ride it all over Camp Atterbury with my sister. She had a horse too, obviously. So with the natural environment that I lived in, it was probably one of the most fascinating experiences I think I've had in my life, was living on that Army post. Pretty much, we kind of called it the King Ranch because we had access to the Jeeps and the equipment to drive around on the post. So once, I took art classes in high school, which were miserable. All I can say is it was horrible. But as a little kid, I have a grade card that says something along the line of Alexa collects too many library books because I love library books, and she draws horses all the time. And I remember one of my teachers saying, "Were you born in a barn?" Now, back then I was mortified, but now it's like, yeah, of course, I'd love to have been born in a barn. So, it started out early for me. In high school or as middle school, the art class that I was taking, they set me up to do all the backdrops for the plays. So I had a little group of kids that were helping me paint the backdrops, things like that. So, of course, once I went to college, I wanted to be an art major, as a painter. So a painting major and a teaching major, a double major. And there wasn't any sculpture to speak of except for one, one sculpture one. I can remember that. It was, we had to sculpt these fire bricks, which is a horrid material. I thought, well, I'm not going to do this. This is not my gig. Well, then we started doing life modeling from a live model, and we had two students. There's two students on each one of the modeling stands. As soon as I got my hands on that clay with a live model in front of me, it was electrifying. I couldn't get it out of my head. Once I graduated I still couldn't get a sculpture major at Ball State University. So once I left school, I moved out to Scottsdale, Arizona, which sort of is where my horse interest was also, well, it wasn't sort of, the horse interest was going on in the early 80s. And I was doing painting. I was with a gallery out of Texas that it was Alderman Conley, who was John Conley, which was the governor of Texas, had that gallery. So I started out with them, and I was painting. And but in Scottsdale at the time, they had quite a few art casting foundries. And I do need to back up just a hair. One of my professors at Ball State, he was my drawing professor. He had a small studio out at his farm and a foundry, a very small foundry. So I went out to see the foundry, and he had cast some small statues in bronze of his dogs, which were Bouvier de Flanders dogs, which I was just totally enamored with. I couldn't believe I didn't know those dogs existed. So that sort of gave that thing that was in the back of my head. So once I got out to Scottsdale, there are sculptures everywhere. Back in those days, it was a very popular medium, especially out west for the Western art pieces. So I went to a foundry, Bear Paw Foundry, which is right downtown in Scottsdale at the time, and talked to Lauren Phippen, who was the son of one of the original cowboy artists of America. And he showed me how to make an armature. And when my husband asked him at the time, he said, well, how do you think she's going to do once I brought a model in? He said, she's going to smoke them. That's what he said. So I got started, and because of the cost, and it's an expensive medium to work in, I felt that in order to get these pieces cast, I had to do something that was sellable, to pay for the castings and to make, more castings down the road. So I started doing horses. And at the time I was working part-time riding horses, Arabian horses, from in Scottsdale. So I'd go out there about 4:00 in the morning And my only job really was to ride this one stallion. Cyranos was his name, is a Bosque son. Wonderful horse, extremely talented. So I rode him and drove him. And by the time it was about 6 o'clock in the morning, it started to get hot because it was in the summer. So I was watching him in the round pen one day when I was working him. And I thought, that's it. That's what I want to do. So I create my first bronze I created was a portrait of him in a bidding rig. And so that was my first casting. So after that, I started doing. I'm trying to think what I did next. It was a couple foals that I did, and the veterinarian that was working with the horses that we had, and also this trainer's horses, bought one. I'll never forget this either. He's a really cute guy, and he said, I want to buy that statue of yours, and sat down and at the desk in his office, brings out cash, and he starts flipping the money out on the table, and I thought, maybe I could make a living at this, so I started doing a series of work, and Alderman's gave me a show in Scottsdale with my paintings and some of my sculptures.
So how old would you have been then, Alexa? Because I'm thinking you must have been at that point was, okay, what am I going to do to make a living out of this? Am I going to ride horses? Am I going to do barn chores? How am I going to make a living being an artist? That must have been pivotal.
I was very aware that I could easily have gone into the horse business. But I felt it was like joining the circus. And I didn't think that I could have a family and I'd be on the road all the time, that type of thing. I thought, oh, it's so easy because I really love it. I really love it. But I thought, no, I can't do it. I want to do the art.
So would you have been in your early 20s then? I'm trying to put this in context.
Yeah, I was probably 27 or 26, 27, something like that. So it was a conscious effort on my part to push the horse stuff off to the side, still be involved in it. But I figured I had to either do one or the other. I couldn't do both, as a profession. So I ended up, there was a art show in Minneapolis, St. Paul, called Western Wildlife Art, blah, blah, blah. And so I went up there with the pieces I had. And, now I'm a greenie. Okay, this is new. You go to an event like this, there's all these artists. They were like duck carvers, that kind of thing. I had sculpture with me. I'll never forget sitting across the hallway from a very well-known gallery that had all the artists sitting there and people were talking to them. And this one guy, older fellow that carved these fabulous duck carvings. And I'd hear people go, well, how many hours did it take you to do that? And his standard answer was 300 hours. And I was like, okay, I guess I got that down pat. So I had my little statue set out on the table, and a fellow comes in, kind of a hippie looking guy, and I had a purse and that kind of stuff. And he says, I really like your work. Here's my card. I'll call you after this show is over. And, I took it and I thought, okay, yeah, we'll see what happens. So I go home and I didn't sell anything there. But when the fellow calls me up, he says, we would like to commission you to do a series, a Pony Express series for us. And I said, okay. And we'd like to fly you out to the East Coast. I can't remember what town that was. I said, okay. So they set all that up, and he said, this is for the Rockefeller collection. I'm like, okay. So I went and, interviewed with them, I guess you call it, got the project going. And that was pretty much stepping off into this art world where I had to be productive and have to learn how to work the commission end of it. Also know this work's going to be out there in the public view. So there was some of those pressures as to how accurate, how good these things are going to look.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that, Alexa. When you're early in your career, in any career, it's a pressure, isn't it? Of being commissioned to do something is very different to coming at it from your own, personal pleasure and taking your time and creating what you want to do.
Right.
When you're being paid to do a job,
right,
there's a pressure. Now, how did you handle that when you were starting your career? I
think for me, I like that pressure. I like the pressure. If anything, it sort of like calms me down, because if I'm not doing a project, I'm sort of bouncing off the walls, looking for something to do and try to stay out of trouble, So the pressure doesn't bother me, because I learned quickly if there's issues, how do you fix it? So it's all problem solving and how to work with people, how to get the work done. And, when you're commissioning work like that, if on the other side of it, always look at the people that are asking you to create something that's never been created before. So they're going to depend on you to come up with the idea. Maybe they come up with the overall idea, but you're supposed to express it through your artwork. So pressure, no problem.
What about the timing, though? When you've got that pressure, as you said, they have the idea, you have to then create it, but the creativity takes time, right? So do you then say to them, well, it is going to take X amount of time and they just have to be patient? Or do you get pressure on them thinking, I want this for a certain time? Even in their head, they have the idea of, well, that should be done by Christmas or whatever.
Most of them, especially this was like it's more of a commercial kind of project. Yes, they have a definite delivery time. So you sort of back up from that time, try and get with the foundry people as to what their schedule is. So it gives me an idea of how much time I have to, bang this thing out. On that particular job, I'll never forget the people that, you've got to depend on mold makers. Number one, mold maker messed up the model, and they called me up and said the mold's not working, which it should have. There was no excuse for that, but I had to resculpt the thing. Okay, so that was a little bit of a hitch in the get up, I guess, but I did it. And I was able to get it to the foundry so that they could get those things cast. And then they had me do more pieces after that. But once I started with that, I had enough money to start making what I call pieces that I could put in a gallery. So I don't know. I think I was in another show. At a horse show in Louisville, Kentucky. And I think I'm pretty sure this lady came up to me and she wanted to represent my work, and it was Klausner Cooperage, which was in Louisville. Really nice gallery. She had great work in there. At the time, she had George Claxton, which a contemporary painter. He also had done some statue work too, and Andre Potter was one of the other artists. So I started out with her in the horse part of this, or equine, I guess you want to call it, equine end of it. The Texas gallery was wanting me to do cowboys and Indians, and I didn't really want to do that. I didn't feel like that was the genre that I had enough emotional bank in, that I experienced enough of that. First of all, I had English horses, show horses.
Right. That's where I want to come back to that, because your equestrian influence, was there any in your family actually before you started getting your own horses and ponies?
Well, yes, my older sister had a horse, and she had stabled it. It was in Muncie. Ball Brothers company had saddlebreds, and there was a trainer there, Bob Whitney, a very well-known trainer. And I used to go out with her she had I think he was just a great horse. I think it was a paint, because I remember he had white down his back leg. But there was saddlebreds there. Now, I was in grade school, okay? And one of the girls that was in my class in grade school, grandpa was the trainer, okay? So I got to go out with her on her bicycle, get on her bicycle right out to the barn and watch him work those horses out. I remember working them outside in the outdoor arena. And I was just, really enthralled with that type of horse. So that's where that started. I had, then I went to the All Arabian Horse Show in Indianapolis. Ended up buying a Arabian horse for me to ride at Camp Atterbury, which I trail rode him. I actually showed him in native costume, ride a buck, that kind of thing, because he was basically a pleasure horse. But I also raced him on the track, a mile track, when I was in high school. And I had to train him to run that distance. I had to borrow the saddle and the helmet, which was a hunt helmet. And these were exhibition races for the Arabian people. They were trying to get people to understand and get out there that the Arabians could have, they could have racing horses. So I'll tell you, it was a mile race, and they didn't have a gate or, a starting gate. So we had to start from a line, and this other horse leaped on the back of and I had a little stallion, leaped on the back of my horse, dragged me off, knocked me down on the ground, and my horse takes off down the track. Now my sister's there, and she hollers out his name. His name was Caleb. Caleb stops dead in his tracks, and she goes up and grabs him. And then, of course, my parents were there. They sat down, and I think they covered their eyes at that point. And they put me back up on the horse, and off we went. Well, he's a distance horse, and there was two very tall, what we later found out were thoroughbred horses that these people had put in that race. Weren't supposed to do that. They take off. They're so far gone I could hardly see them. And I'm on Caleb, riding along. I'm like, if I ever catch him while on the back stretch, because he could run all day. They started to run out of gas, and I ended up winning that race, which was fairly exciting.
Was there any sibling rivalry at that point?
No, not really. No, but my sister's been in the horse business too, and as a pro with quarter horses, show horses. But the other part was I was also raced trotting ponies on the track as a kid. I had to lie about my age. I was the only woman driver, okay, against these guys with these ponies that were bred for trotters and pacers. And so we raced those ponies all over the Midwest pretty much. So I was woman driver of the year, and I had world champion trotting ponies. So I got a lot of the flavor of what it would be like to be a professional. And it's not, if I had another lifetime, it'd be fun to do that, but my art called. And so that's why I ended up doing what I do.
Well, just let's touch on the painting then, because obviously the anatomy of the horse was something that has informed you and educated you and helped you obviously to become the sculptor that you've been. But with the painting, which you started off doing, I'm curious as to who your influences were there. If you went to a gallery, who was it that really caught your eye?
Let's see. Well, I studied all the famous artists, Degas, Munnings, of course. Michelangelo's work. I really, because of the drawings that he did. I looked at the old masters mostly. I can't think of there wasn't really any equine art that I was able to get my hands on, because back then we didn't have, they didn't have the internet. Wasn't a lot of publications that had that, so I pretty much had to depend on the old masters type of things.
And what about contemporary artists? Who really catches your eye these days?
There's a British artist. He's no longer with us, but it's John Skeeping's work.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
He did pastels. I'm not sure if he did any oils, but I'm pretty sure it was mostly pastels. But he also did sculptures. I mean, he did that Secretariat that's at Belmont Park, I think it is. Yeah. He did that work. That's life size. Hazeltine, the one that did Man of War, is a really beautiful work. It's stylized, yet anatomically correct, which is what I was trying to work towards, was to satisfy my desire for these things to look like they could actually move like they do. So the anatomy was really important to me, but I also wanted the style, my style, which I could lock in as to what, if you look at it, you'd know it's, one of my pieces. Not illustration type work at all, because that just gets into, especially with sculpture, overdone, too much information. I want the viewer to feel some of that in themselves, because then it becomes part of them too, if they can look at it and think about how that affects them. But, and there's, anyway, that's pretty much who I can think of right off the top of my head.
Well, one of the reasons I want to do this podcast, Alexa, is to bring female artists out from behind the easel, if you like, out of the shadows. Because when we reference artists, the masters or even contemporary artists, it's so often men.
Yeah, it is.
And the female gaze is different.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to, if you can, sort of characterize that. I mean, there's two questions there, really. Why do you think now in 2023 that we're not profiling female artists, because there are a gazillion of them in the world, high-profile artists in so many different mediums? Why do men continue to dominate? And then the other piece of that is the female gaze. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to both of those?
Okay. I personally have experienced, we'll pick the guy over the chick type thing. Sculpture's it's a lot of work. Okay. It's a very physical thing to do. And sometimes I think that the people that are commissioning your work think a woman can't do it. And that, that's one part of it. The other is the men control the access to the clients. So they may throw it that direction. And I've had, subtle, sometimes not so subtle. But I have to say that most of the really important pieces that I have done have been promoted and pushed by women. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think that they recognize the ability to produce it, to be able to do it, and to put in that I'm not sentimental. But I want that emotional connection. But if there's anything that turns me off, is something that's really a sentimental, vision of something, because I'm not sure life is sentimental. It can be hard fab, wonderful, all these different things, but sentimental isn't on my plate. So the gallery system too is pretty much handled by men. And maybe it's because they like that maybe there's a male view that connects with them that we don't see, that I don't see, you know what I mean? But I think it's really, what's unfortunate about it to me is I have been around a lot of people that have come up to me and said, women, and said, well, I went to college, as an art major, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, really? Yeah. What are you doing? Nothing in the art field. And I thought, what a shame that they got pushed to the side, or were forced into somehow, making a living at it, which is how the men, as you know, calibrate success. So, they get into a different field. But I feel bad that there isn't more women out there that have had the access to the means to do it, because it takes backers. I've had backers. I've had people that stepped up and put pretty good amount of money up so I could do these things once I got, up over the hump enough to show that I could do the work, the quality of the work on time, deal with the clients, all that kind of stuff. But it's a real learning curve. And, in the art field, the idea that, oh, you're a flibbermagibbet, you can, you're arty farty, that kind of stuff. And do you have your head in the clouds, or where are you at this? And so I've been able to meet the artistic side of it, but also the business end of it. And so I must instill some confidence in folks that I will do what I say I'm going to do. I'll do it even more than what I'm trying to tell them I'm going to do. And that's always the way I've been with the commission work that I've done, is to give them 110%, not stop somewhere along the line, say that's good enough. It's not. So I'll knock myself out to do that. But the funding money, it's tough. Like they used to, some of the states still do have a percentage for the arts, and that gets into politics of who's going to get the job. And in the sculpture field, I see a lot of work out there that doesn't relate to the public very well. This is when I was before I moved out to Scottsdale, I was a docent at the Contemporary Art Museum in Madison, Wisconsin. And what that taught me was I had to get out there and talk about contemporary artworks. Not particularly my cup of tea, you know what I mean? But they would bring these artists in. We'd listen to their talk about their work, and then I'd have groups come in and they're standing there looking at me, and I remember the head of the docents, who's a really good friend of mine. Now I was standing back there like I can't do it. I'm scared. And she goes, get out there. Pretty much pushed me out. And so I started telling these visitors to the museum what this artist concept was and all this other kind of stuff. And I thought, you know what? I've got about 15 seconds to get them. And after that, they if you don't, they're done. And so the language that these artists are using, to me, has to be something they can read, it's English. They can read it. They're not getting it. You see what I'm saying? So I thought that was, it taught me real quick what the public will absorb when they're looking at a outdoor statue or something like that that's in a outdoor space, a public piece.
So that as much about personality then, when you're trying to convince the art world and the audience to take women seriously, right? You've got to have a strong enough personality as a woman to stand up against any men who might be bidding for the same job.
Right. Well, so when I did the Barbaro project, there was some issues with some of the male people I was dealing with, not the commissioning people, but the vendor people, things like that. Mm-hmm. And, I can remember they were trying to railroad me on the project, where the statue's placed, all that had to be designed. And it's a really long story, but the materials that we were going to use had to make sure that they were light fast outside, so they wouldn't change color. With the sun hitting it like it does where that piece sits really hot there. Right. So when I was dealing with the marble people, they were trying to push off a material that you use indoors in houses, and they use that marble inside because it doesn't get the sun on it, so it doesn't change color. So I'm like, so this beautiful stone that we're going to set outside on this huge plant, it's going to turn milky colored. Well, I finally got that out of them. Of course, I'm sitting there thinking, I just wasted all this time, and you're trying to jam this down my throat. And what do you think? I'm stupid, So we fixed that by using a stone that we had to get out of Brazil, and it's not changed. It's something you would put outside, but that's what I get. I'd be in these conference calls, and they were trying to talk over the top of me, and I would be like, I would enlist the folks that could stop that. Can you, I'm saying that, like, stop that. We need to get this decision made, and I'm glad that I held tight, because they were trying to bowl me over. And I think that happens in a lot of jobs, but I thought, just because I'm a woman, you're going to tell me you're going to do it this way. And after all the research I did into it, that wouldn't have been a good idea. It wouldn't have gotten us the result that we wanted. There was one guy, he was really funny. This is Kentucky for you. The railing system that they use at Churchill Downs it's shaped like an airplane wing, and it's padded like a helmet, a bicycle helmet. It's got a foam on the inside. It's made so that if a jockey hits it, it's thrown off a horse, and it's angled so that hopefully that jockey will go to the infield and it won't be out in the middle of the track. So I had taken photographs of it, but I needed the schematics of it, like the architectural drawings of it. So I found out who it was that designed those things. So I called the guy up and get on the phone with him, and I said, I'm doing this statue for the Derby Museum. It'll be outside the Derby Museum, and you could hear. Didn't say anything, and I said, "Can I get the schematics for the railing system so we can reproduce that?" And he draws in his breath, and I think he probably had a cigar in his mouth, and he says, "Sure, I can give that to you, but if you give it to anybody else, we'll have to kill you." I was like, okay, no, I'm not going to do that. But anyway, you get people, you just have to read them. You have to read them. That everybody's got a different view of everything. And I don't criticize the male side of it, because, I think men are fun, or can be. And, you have to sort of speak their language a little bit, and if they think that you can do the job, then they'll buy into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've made sure that you're not at a disadvantage because you have a strong personality. I mean, being a woman has not been a disadvantage for you, I would imagine, and clearly from the success that you've had. But I wanted to talk just a little bit about not so much your personality, but what was crafted you to be the artist that you are, because you have to find your eye, don't you, and define your own style in art.
Right. Right.
But when you're doing sculpting, it's different to the one-dimensional painting, right? So you have to switch.
Yeah. Very much. It's completely different. It's more of a, think of a line drawing, that act of putting a charcoal onto a piece of paper and drawing the outlines or the shapes. So that's how I start when I'm looking to do a piece. And then a lot of study, a lot of questions, well, not a lot of questions, but I interview the owners, and they'll tell you a lot too about what they see in that particular animal. And, if you listen, people tell you.
Right.
So, I was never so shocked when the first piece I had cast, when I went to touch it, it was cold, and it was a shock to me because they look warm to me. At least that's how I try to do the work that I do. And, I start them from the inside out. I do use the wire, the armature, the foam to flesh it out enough so it doesn't weigh, 100 pounds if it's a smaller piece, and then put the clay on the outside of it. I think people think that you can take a photograph and copy that in a three-dimensional form. And I don't think it's very successful when that's done. They usually look very stiff, and they look two-dimensional in me. They just don't carry that three-dimensional look to them. It's kind of hard to describe, but once that thing is in 3D, it's in the wire. Even in the wire, when I put it on the modeling stand, I start turning it and adjusting the angles. And I always like to get these animals offset a little bit so that that the movement that they're doing may be at that particular stride, but it's indicating the next movement so that it has that movement forward. And I also, just with the racing end of it, I was always like, what is it about us humans that watch these horses go around a track, and how you can't take your eye off of them? It's I don't know if it's that apex predator part of us that locks in and watches. But I try to look at it from all different directions, and that intellectual part of it, get inside the heads of why we have that relationship with these animals, without being, so obvious about it. But the painting is a completely different thing, because if I stop, I've done a piece and I'm like, okay, good. I get to play a little bit and get, my pastels out or my ink pens, charcoal, things like that. It's not easy. I have to retrain my eye and maybe my thinking too, which sort of jolts me a little bit. And so then when I go back to my sculpture for me is easy. That's my comfort place. I mean, it's hard work, but it's an easy thing for me to do. But it may be from years of training that it's become easy for me.
Yeah.
I can't say I have labored over these things. It's sort of like the whole idea of a cow roper. Those guys throw the rope, and the other guys, the what they call them, tailor or header. I can't remember. They rope them, you to get it down and make it work, but I've sort of gotten over that, struggle part of it. A lot of it's just, trying to get the work done without hurting myself. And it's physically on your hands, your body, everything else, especially on these larger ones. It's a lot of work, but I do these things from the inside out. I do not depend on scanning a smaller piece and enlarging it and then buttering it on the outside with wax clay and tooling it, and then it's done. To me, and I can tell you statues that have been done that way. I can tell by looking at them that that's what they've done.
Right.
So
I want to ask you, if you were at a gallery or one of your openings, or when people look at your work, if they don't know you're there and you're hovering, and if you could eavesdrop, what do you like to hear them say about your art?
Nice piece. Nice. I have had such emotional responses to these things. These clients cry on me. And art is such a wonderful means of expression that I'm sometimes shocked at the reaction, because it's not me. It's I put everything into it, and I don't own it anymore. It's out there in the world, and that's for them to experience. So it sort of shocks me a little bit when I hear some of these comments made. And you want me to say what kind of comment? Well, it's good piece, nice. It took me, just this experience of letting go and unattaching, unattaching myself. I don't know if that's a word. Untaching myself to the detaching. That's a better one. When the bronze is cast from a clay model, you're going from a matte brown, kind of an inert material, to it's a gold color when they've buffed it, and they're working on it to finish it, or get it up to where we can put the patina on it. So it's sort of a shock to have turned it in the clay, and then when I go see it, and in particular this one time was with Barbaro, they had it hung from the ceiling at Art Castings in Colorado, out in Loveland. And they had a hanging from the ceiling, and it's like a factory there. So there's a big glass door, and my husband says, "Now just stand back and observe it for a minute." And I hit that door, open the door, and I'm in there looking at it. I'm like, "Oh my God, it's gold! Oh, look at that!" So at that point, that piece is still mine, because we were, putting the jockey on it and attaching it to the rail system, all that kind of stuff. But once it was installed at Churchill Downs, I could still see things that I wished I had done different, or I wish I'd had more time, because that was on a very tight time schedule. So I didn't have a lot of time to make any back up and make a different decision and change something a little bit. So I pretty much had to put it out there. So it's up, and people were looking at it and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't have any emotional response to it, except I was looking at what I should have done on it, and I was like kind of miserable, when it's sort of like, oh, it's in bronze, I can't change it now. But then maybe a year or so later, I was over there really early in the morning. I think 6 o'clock in the morning, we were over there to watch the Derby horses work. And I was there by myself there wasn't anybody around much. And I stood back there and I thought, oh, now I get it. And that was it. That was finally was able to check the box and say, it's there. It's done. And I'm good with it.
Yeah. And it's probably one of your most famous pieces, but would you say it's one of the pieces that you're most proud of?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. You can't, it is in it was a masterful stroke from the Jacksons and the Derby Museum and the Churchill Downs was to put a statue there in that particular place, which was a planter. There was a tree there when I first went to see the site, and how it made a statement, and especially in public art, it looks like it's been there forever.
Yes.
And I wanted it to be the people's horse. I went around and talked. I actually went to the bars behind the track, talked to the locals people on what they thought about Barbaro, to get kind of a feeling for that. It's going to be in their backyard, how they're going to feel about it. Mm-hmm. And especially something like that, it had to sit in that space with that white amphitheater behind it with the gold Churchill Downs name at the top. And I thought it's going to have to be commanding enough in its own presence to be able to balance that, so we took plywood piece, and I drew out an overlife size statue, Barbara statue, and we had to stand in that planter and turn which direction angle that we were going to set that piece at and how high, so that you could see it from down on the corner where the stoplight is, across the big parking lot. And also people that come up to it would be able to stand near it or sit near it, and it wouldn't be elevated too high that all you see underneath the horse, belly and all that stuff. So it had to be the right angle for photography. And, I've been told it's the most photographed thing in Kentucky.
I can well imagine it. I mean, that is a success story in and of itself, but how would you define success as an artist?
Well, all I can say is myself is I've got the best job in the world. It's fun. It's exciting. You never know what's going to come next. You have a team of people that you work with, like I do with the foundry in Colorado, who are wonderful to work with. They produce even better than what I think I take in there. And to see the end result on time, the castings are wonderful. The patinas are great. All that stuff works well for me as a businesswoman, art business lady, and also the fact that it ends up being a piece of artwork that the public can enjoy. And so that means a lot to me. It really does.
Yeah.
I get to do it and I get to do another one after. I get to keep making more, which is unfortunate in that part. But you make your own. I think you make your own success, and I work by myself. I don't see a lot of people all the time. I'm in the studio all the time. I like to go out and ride my horse, tend to my chickens, all that kind of stuff. But most of what I'm thinking about is art. And I'm fortunate that I get to do that and didn't have to sit behind a desk at a computer typing. Ugh.
Well, you combined all your passions. So I would imagine, when the day comes that you do, put down your brush or you stop sculpting, mm-hmm. Would you say that you would end your artistic career with the kind of satisfaction that you would have always craved as you were making your way in the art world? Mm-hmm. Do you think you've reached a point where, okay, if I didn't do another statue, if I didn't paint another painting or draw another picture, I'd be satisfied with how the arc of my artistic career has gone?
I really never thought about that until I had a newspaper came in here and doing an article on me, and the photographer was, shooting pictures of the work I was working on, and they were sports writers. The article was art and sport, blah blah blah. So he turns to me, he was shooting pictures. He turns to me and something about it. He goes, "Why would you have to do anything more after you did Barbaro?" And I'm like, I looked at him like, what? And I thought, well, I guess you could do that, but I'm just I'm not built that way. I can't sit still, and I'm bored easily. So now I can't imagine not doing this until physically, I guess, if I couldn't do it anymore. But I think there's ways around that too.
Yeah. Well, you're probably fine as well.
Yeah. No, I'm not gonna. I can't imagine. I've got so many things I'd like to do. I can't imagine not keep chipping away at that.
Let me put it another way then. In terms of your reputation, your legacy, would there be a feeling of contentment within you?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, one of the big questions I would get would, what do you what did this statue do for your career, or what is going to do for your career? And of course, I'm like, it's pretty obvious, but I didn't say that. But yeah, that was a big, that project was not easy to get. I had to compete against artists from all over the world to get it.
This is Barbara.
Yeah, to get that prime real estate and that very public artwork piece that the common man on the street. I mean, I wasn't allowed. Well, I wasn't allowed. I wasn't supposed to have anybody see the model when I was working on it. And so studio I had wasn't high enough ceilings for us and no dock for us to have that big of a model in there. So I had to use the garage that we had in the house that was built by, this house was built by an architect. So it had a big steel beams in the garage because this guy had racing boats or something. Not motorboats, but sailboats and stuff. So he'd hang these things from the ceiling. So I had pretty much exhausted trying to find a commercial space that didn't smell like oil, where they have cars in them and things. Because I was going to have to get on the floor and for days, weeks, months. And I health-wise, I just couldn't deal with it, with that idea. The one studio I tried to get, I couldn't get the guy to move out quick enough because we had to get it. We had to get started on it. So anyway, I had the mold makers were set up to come in when I put my tools down and said I'm ready. They were ready to fly in to come in and do the molds on site, and I had made the model so that I could wheel it out the door without the jockey on in case. I don't know if you're supposed to say this shit hit the fan, and the mold makers couldn't make it or something happened like that. But so I had this piece in the garage. So they had shipped in plaster for the molds. So there's a big skid, and the guy comes in, FedEx, I think it was, pulls down the driveway, gets out, and I had the garage door open, and I said something about, well, you got to push it in here. And I got a big rear end of Barbaro. And the guy stops and looks at me. Eyes get real big. And I say, yeah, come on in and look at it. He comes in, walks to the front of that horse, and puts his arms around his neck. Okay. Now, that told me something that because I was doing the footwork on it at that point. It was all pieces, upsizing it from the smaller model, all that kind of stuff. So my brain was tunnel vision, and I wasn't seeing that part. This is a guy here in Madison. They don't even know what a thoroughbred is. You know what I mean? Where I live right now, they have no idea. Churchill Downs, yeah, I've heard of that. But this guy, it really hit him. Okay, maybe I got something going on here. So, that's the crux of the deal, for me is, how are you going to combine that passion I have and the longevity in being able to do it? And sculptors take forever to hit their mark. It takes a long time to learn the craft of it. So it's not like painters, it's a different deal. Usually they pretty much start hitting it at 50. And so hopefully we live long enough to get those things done that we'd like to do.
Well, it sounds as if you have, and I know there's a lot more to come from you. I'm not going to ask you what you're working on next. I know a lot of these projects are confidential until they go public. But I know you're being creative each and every day of your life. And Alexa, it's just been a joy to walk through your life again and your career.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, before you go, just let everybody know how they can find your work on social media and on your website.
Website is alexakingfineart.com. And my email address is alexakingstudios at gmail.com. Yeah, gmail.com.
On Instagram and Facebook?
Instagram, I think it's Alexa King Bronze, something like that. I just change those every once in a while just for the heck of it. But yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I try to post process pictures because people don't understand this whole process, and they can see some of these works that I'm working on from the start, and how they look. So it's kind of fun that way. Yeah.
They are fun. Yeah, I enjoy those. So one final question then before I let you go, because there's a lot of artists listening to this, I'm sure, young women, I hope, who will be inspired by this. What kind of advice would you give them no matter what medium they're going into? And they may not be as fortunate to get the start that you did. Mm-hmm. But when you say, talk about how long it takes to become established, what's your message for them?
This will take a second. When I went back and finished my degree about, I don't know, right before I think it was, maybe I was working on the Barbaro piece at the time. So I went back and finished the degree at the University of Wisconsin. So I had to take some of the, general courses and whatever, to get that done. So there was, I think there was probably 3/4 of the students in the class were women. And they eventually found out what I was doing, what I do, and so they send this one little girl comes over and talks to me, my kid's age, because I had my daughter was in school at the UW at the time. And, they come over and she comes over and says, is this your second career? I'm like, no, I'm still on the first one. So, the next question is, how do you become famous? And I said, well, here's the best thing I can tell you. You either do this or not. You don't wait tables. You don't have a part-time job. You either sink or swim. You'll figure it out. That's the only way you're going to do this. You have to commit yourself to it no matter what. And I mean, it took time for me to get there, and I mean, not having, just not having money, having enough money to live on, but, wasn't making a bunch of money at it. And, but it just kept me going forward. And that's what I tell young people. I said, you've got to stick with it, educate yourself, look at a lot of art and you've got to understand that there's going to be 99% of it is work. 1% of it is, the fun part, which is the, people looking at your work or, gallery stuff, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I guess that's the icing on the cake. But it's work. If you enjoy work, the art business is work. You've got to do it.
Well, you've combined passion and talent together, Alexa, and made a success of it. So congratulations again on a wonderful career. Keep doing it. And thank you very much again for being my first guest on the show. And yeah, it's been a joy.
Well, I hope all success for you. I can't wait. I listen to podcasts all the time when I'm working, so it'll be fun to hear.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again, Alexa. Always good to catch up.
Sure. You too.
My thanks again to Alexa and to you for tuning in. I'd love to hear from you. So if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can follow me at the AART Podcast. That's AART Podcast on Instagram, or email me at hollowellstudios@gmail.com. That's HOLLOWELL studios@gmail.com. And if you know of any women artists who you think I should feature on the show, then please let me know. And if you have a moment to leave a rating or a review wherever you're listening to this podcast, that will help others to find us. I'll be back next week when my guest will be Debbie Mueller. So until then, thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.